Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the AI Forecast, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Paul Muller, and proudly sponsored by the amazing folks at Cloudera. Thank you again for bringing us another episode. As always, we're joined by the industry's leading practitioners to explore the past, the present, and the future of enterprise data and AI. And today, we're going to take a look at the topic of responsible AI. Ooh. And we'll talk about a framework that you can use to help put some structure around what for many today is probably something of a bit of a Wild West process and technology in your business. Now, our guest is the principal creator of the guide, Olivia Gambelin. Olivia is an AI ethicist who specializes in the practical application of ethics to technological and artificial intelligence innovations, and is the author of the book, Responsible AI, available at good bookstores everywhere. She's also the founder of Ethical Intelligence, the world's largest network of responsible AI practitioners and advisors, businesses from the behemoths of the Fortune 500 all the way down to Series A startups. Olivia, welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you on. Now, we're going to jump into the topic of responsible AI. It sounds parental, doesn't it, really? It sounds like you've got a babysitter, but we'll get into some of those topics in just a second. But before we do something at the beginning of every podcast we call the lightning round. The fast four, the furious four, call it what you will.
All right.
Limber up a little bit and allow our audience to get to know you through a slightly different lens. Are you ready to do this?
I'm ready for some self-discovery. Let's do this.
All right, roll. What would people who know you best say is your superpower?
Ooh. So a lot of my friends, I am known as the kind of chaotic one. I always come to the table with some crazy story, whether in work or life. I do a lot of travel and I meet a lot of people, and I am someone that is easy to talk to. So I get a lot of stories.
We talk about AI and how great it is at automating the mundane and the creative and all that sort of great stuff. What would you like to see AI automate for you personally in your future?
For me personally, I would love to have AI just to automate my travel, but travel as how I prefer. Like I said, I do a lot of travel. I'm on the road a lot with client work and speaking and everything. And I am very particular in the ways that I travel. I have my shortcuts. I have my quirky tendencies. I'd love for AI to be able to automate aspects of that. Like there's only certain airlines and certain airports that I like to go through because I've been through all the airports. I have airports that I refuse to go through for odd reasons. Like if I could get an AI to just go, okay, we're never sending you through London Heathrow, I'd be like, you were amazing. Thank you so much. I never have to go through that airport again.
I think, and you know what, as someone who traveled, probably the better part of 1 million kilometers a year for many years, I empathize. I know exactly what you're talking about, and no one ever quite books your travel the way you book your travel.
Exactly.
I like it. So, we're going to have to come up with that. All right. Someone in Y Combinator, start pounding on the keyboard now. You've got some Series A investors with Olivia and myself. All right, last question. It took me a long time to realize that as an exec, I have little hacks or things that I do when I work with data that help me be effective with it. I'm just curious, what hack or best practice has helped you most when working with data?
For me, my hack is actually having to find a metaphor for what I'm doing. Meaning, and I guess this actually ties back a little bit to maybe what my friends know me for as a storyteller. If I can find a metaphor with what I'm trying to do with data or how I'm trying to process it or understand it, that I can sit down with anyone, no matter their background, and give them that metaphor and they understand the core concepts and fundamentals of what I'm talking about. That for me is a hack, also because a lot of my work depends on being able to be that communication translator. So I always try and relate everything to a story that has nothing to do with the technology and everything to do with, like, I'll probably tell you this at one point. I talk about responsible AI and AI ethics through a story about a dishwasher. Completely separate, not at all related to AI, but it's a fundamental story that I know that I have the core concepts down and I know I can communicate those core concepts to other people.
That's amazing. Well, let's get on to the topic then, and tell me another little story. Tell me the story of Olivia at high school at 16, talking to a careers counsellor going, Have you ever thought about AI ethics as a career? Clearly not. How did you come to find yourself writing a book about responsible AI and getting into the space of AI ethics?
You're actually going to laugh because I went to a Catholic high school, and one of the priests, my family adopts priest friends, were Italian Irish. There was no other option. We were going to have priest friends. And one of our priest friends from my high school told me one day, he's like, have you ever thought about AI ethics, like technology ethics? And this was before this was a subject. And I kid you not, I looked at him and I went, no, I'm not doing that. So, here I am. Like,
always listen to your priest.
Yeah, exactly. Have your good priest friends. No, how I found myself in this space, honestly, I've always been fascinated by the theory of what makes things work. So I actually started in physics. I love theoretical physics, but I was finding that I love the concepts more than the mathematical application. So that led me to my gateway drug of a logic course in philosophy. And I was like, this is amazing. And one thing led to the next. I found ethics and morality. And for me, ethics is understanding the way that people work with each other, how our relationships manage, how our decision frameworks in our individual selves work within this world. So I just kept digging and, finished my undergrad in ethics and said, I will come back to this as soon as I find something practical to do with this. I'm a very practical person. And I ran across the conversation probably about 2 or 3 years after that undergrad around data ethics. And I went, this is it. This is my industry. I'd been working in tech for years. And this is I call it my obsession, but my love of ethics, and they cross over. And I was stubborn. I didn't look at any career prospects. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I have been at it ever since.
I love that story. That is sensational. All right, well, let's get into
Probably not what you expected.
No, not at all. But you know what? I think it reminds me of Scott Galloway's talk that he did, I think, at NYU, where he's like, people don't, establish a career in accounting because they're passionate about accounting. They become passionate about accounting because they're good at it. And when you're good at it, when you have a natural affinity for or an interest in something, you become passionate about it. And so clearly that's what you've done. I think it's great. Let's talk about the topic, because to your point, I guess my question is this: as we think about responsible AI, what are some of the big misconceptions you think people have when they think about the topic, or even when they hear the sentence?
The biggest, there's so many misconceptions. I'm going to focus on 2. First one being, you hear responsible AI, and you even said as we started, it sounds like I'm the babysitter coming in telling you, don't do that, go sit in the corner on timeout. The misconception there being that responsible AI is only a primary risk mitigation practice, meaning you're only using it to say what you can't do. You're trying to prevent bad things from happening. You're trying to make sure the robots don't take over the world. That's only one part of responsible AI. When a company truly does put the practices in place, get those foundations in, responsible AI actually becomes an innovation practice. So right now, for example, I was just talking with a client, and I'm talking with their engineering team. We're looking at setting up just basic guidelines. And now these are guidelines saying, don't cross over this line. This is the area you're not supposed to go into. But we're talking about it in terms of innovation by saying we know exactly what our parameters are, so we're not getting hung up, worried that we're taking unnecessary risks or we're causing problems down the line. We can actually create and innovate faster now because we're not burdened by that thought of, did we do that correctly? Did we miss anything? Having to go back and re-innovate because we screwed something up. So that first misconception around responsible AI is that it's a bunch of people saying, no, don't do this. It's actually an innovation accelerator when done properly. And the second big misconception is that it's a technical solution. So you see a lot of articles or thought pieces talking about, here is the latest in the privacy practices and how you manage your data sets, or the latest fairness metric to use for countering bias in your algorithms. Those are all very technical focused solutions. And that does play a role in the responsible AI ecosystem, but responsible AI and AI, if we're being honest, is a more holistic picture. We actually have to look at the people and the process behind the scenes as well, because that's really where the big challenges are coming into place. AI is always a human story, and responsible AI needs to get all the way into the culture and the operations for it to work. So those are the two big misconceptions. Responsible AI is an innovation practice, and it's not necessarily about the technology.
Which, as you were going through this, funnily enough, it occurred to me that I don't really know if I've got a working definition of responsible AI. What is responsible AI? How would you explain it to somebody?
Well, can I tell you my dishwasher story?
Go for, you know what? I think all of our listeners are sitting on the edge of their seats wondering what this dishwasher story is about.
They're going, what in the world? So
I imagine that one of them's at least got this weird idea that a dishwasher tried to kill someone. But that's okay. Let's keep going.
I mean, it could. Great starting point. If Hollywood's listening, great starting point for a movie. Next Terminator. Dishwasher
the dishwasher's played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
I would go see that.
Me too.
So the dishwasher story, I usually use it to describe the difference between responsible AI and AI ethics, but it'll help give some background here for what responsible AI is. So let's think you are an adult, right? You have a house, you have dishes, well, questionable sometimes. And for a lot of people in the States, you have a dishwasher. In other parts of the world, you wash your dishes, but it's the whole factor of actually washing dishes, however that's done. Now, to be a responsible adult, you wash your dishes. It's what keeps the household, keeps the kitchen functioning. If you don't wash those dishes, then the dishes pile up, you have dirty dishes, you have mold if you let them sit for too long. The actual functioning and the running of a kitchen and household will break down if you're not doing that responsible factor. You're doing what needs to be done to keep things running and moving forward.
You have just described every university share house I ever lived in. Keep going.
I know some people are sitting here going, oh no, I have a traumatic experience with dirty dishes. But then you get that, you know what it's like,
yes.
That pain point when you are, or the people around you, aren't being responsible adults by doing what needs to be done to keep things running and keep things functioning. Not just doing well, but just functioning. Mm-hmm. That's like responsible AI. So these business practices that we're putting into place, they're just essentially best practices for how to keep the whole house of AI running forward. There are so many challenges when it comes to either adopting, developing, implementing anything around AI. There's so many pieces that you have to keep track of and that all need to coexist and work kind of like a big puzzle. Responsible AI pulls that puzzle together. It's saying, okay, we've got all of our bases covered so that not only our people know what they're doing, they have the processes in place to know how to do what they need to do, and then they have the technical infrastructure to be able to execute on that. All of this is responsible AI. Now, which sounds super simple, and so people are thinking like, why is this such a problem? Why is responsible AI feel so far in the distance? It's because responsible AI often gets crossed over into AI ethics, and AI ethics is when you actually start to bring ethical principles into the equation. So looking again at our dishwasher, let's say that you share a home with your partner, and you and your partner trade off who does the dishes each night after dinner, right? That responsible chore chart, everything. You guys are being responsible adults. You're doing dishes. You're keeping the household functioning and moving forward. Now, let's say you get home one night and your partner is exhausted. They had a really rough day and it's their turn to do the dishes. Now, you don't have necessarily any responsibility to do those dishes. It's your partner's responsibility. But out of a principle of values such as compassion or empathy towards your partner, you act on that value and you do the dishes. So you're now acting in accordance to a value or a virtue or however you want to call it. You're acting in accordance to compassion. And you are doing the dishes to then keep the household functioning. So in that case, when you're looking back at AI, what you're doing is you are aligning key decisions, key development and adoption decisions with specific ethical principles. And these are the ones you hear like fairness, transparency, explainability, but you can extend that as well to One of my favorites is curiosity. You can extend it to empathy. You can extend it to all of these other values. It's just aligning those decisions there. So responsible AI, and I'm sure this has turned into a much longer definition, and I know you just wanted a short definition, but
No, not at all. This is fascinating.
yeah, responsible AI is like, let me get the structure in place so that I can align my decisions how I need them to in order to, again, adopt, develop, build, whatever you're doing with AI, but keep that aligned with your company mission, with that end goal of being human impact. Long story short.
No,
and do the dishes.
And do the dishes. And so, I think the idea of, good housekeeping and hygiene as different from a moral and an ethical standpoint makes a lot of sense. And I can see why you say it's an accelerator, because if I was to talk to a software development group and talk to them about the importance of good hygiene for things like change management, source code management, etc., no one would argue with me that that's a bad idea. And everyone would say, sure, I can bash out a bit of code really quickly, but if I don't document it, I don't put good comments in, if I don't put it into a source code control system, it's going to atrophy really quickly. We need this stuff in order to not only move quickly now, but not to accrue things like technical debt into the future. The same applies in the case of responsible AI.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite boring at the end of the day. It's nothing fancy.
No,
it's just good hygiene, good change management, all of the above.
That's great though, but I think that also helps frame it. And as you say, it takes away some of the notion of right or wrong from this, which, there is a certain degree of subjectivity that inevitably gets involved in that discussion.
And there's a time and place for those discussions. Absolutely. I'm not saying that those are separate. It's more, there is a time and place, and the emotional reactions that we get to some of these ethical debates can cause unnecessary blockers. Like if we're stuck talking about what's the definition of fairness, meanwhile, we have no metrics in place to be checking for unwanted biases in the data sets. Those are two completely different things. We can have that ethical debate around the definition of fairness, but we still need to be making sure that our data set is clean and correctly labeled. So it makes sure that we have the right pieces in place, and we're putting a time and place for those ethical debates that aren't going to be blockers, but help act as like a North Star, a direction guide for how we're using and developing AI.
So following on from that, I can see one of the big risks in the space of responsible AI, at least from my standpoint, being I walk past your book, pardon me for what I'm about to say, but I walk past your book on the bookshelf and I see responsible AI and I think all of the negative thoughts you have. Ooh, that sounds slow. It sounds bureaucratic. I don't want it. As you're engaging with folks, do you find you have to overcome this idea that responsibility is not necessarily a bad thing?
Yes, that's usually, so some of my favorite client projects and clients are the ones that I get to skip over that conversation with, where people have already come to the logical conclusion that we need responsible AI, point blank. Those I find are always the easiest ones to get started with. It's a lot easier to work with people that already have that mindset and intrinsic motivation, and they get it. And honestly, it has reached a point in time where I'm having less and less of the conversations of why responsible AI matters, mainly because it's more I'm filtering it now. And this is a bit of a sassy way of approaching it, because I used to spend a lot of time of convincing and explaining, let me talk about the importance of responsible AI in terms of ROI and in terms of the bottom line. And I have those tricks. I have all of those frameworks and shorthands and data and case studies and all of the above. I can sit here and I can talk to you for days about how responsible AI is that innovation accelerator. But I've reached the point where there's enough of me out on the internet, and there's enough of a lot of good people and their work in this space that if someone comes to me and asks that question of like, why should I care about responsible AI? I've gotten to the point where I have a very sassy remark where I basically said, if you're asking me this now, If you need me to explain why this matters now, I can't help you. You're too far behind. We're at that point. Like, the space has moved fast and far enough forward, and the importance of it has been established, that if someone's still coming with the mindset that this is something that I'm going to push off, or it doesn't really matter, it's just a bunch of people that are slightly upset that we can push to the side talking about this, then there's nothing I can do. I can't help you. I'm not going to be able to convince you otherwise at this point in time. So a lot of my initial engagements, a lot of my work actually in general is discussion based. I am a translator in many different directions, but really one of the first things I'm doing when engaging with a client, I'll give you the practical side, and then the I don't know what to call the other side, but I have to establish myself as someone that is not scary. Mm-hmm. It's like you were saying. So I'll go into a meeting and I'll tell a story, or I'll drop an F-bomb. I make myself approachable, because responsible AI and ethics is like already feels kind of like an unapproachable. What do I do with this? This is kind of can be scary to approach. Yeah. If I become human and approachable, and I talk about, I screw up all the time, and I'm here to bring you the frameworks and the mental models and the structure that you're looking for to solve your current problems. I'm not trying to bring in extra work. I create the open dialogue that's necessary to actually find the motivation points and find the problems to fix. Mm-hmm. So that's more on, I don't know what you would call that. That's like me establishing as a...
It's that empathic initial beginning. And to that point, I guess what makes it, that was probably the question I was looking for in part was, as you go in and engage with a business, is this a sort of, we talk about the competency matrix, right? Are you consciously incompetent, unconsciously incompetent, consciously competent, et cetera? Most of the people that engage someone like yourself, are they consciously incompetent? They know that they need to be doing something about this and they've realized they need help, or do you often find yourself having to go in and explain the need in the first place? Maybe that was where my question was going.
So in the beginning, it was very much me having to explain the need in the first place. And so a lot of my work was more on awareness building, initial training, initial just kind of engagement. That's why I have built up such a strong pillar in professional speaking, was because that was so necessary. Now, when I'm brought in with clients and specific projects, it's the consciously unaware, knowing we know we need something, we just have no idea what that is. And then I get to come in and work my magic, which is a great time for me. It's quite fun of having people sit and start to explain all of these challenges and problems, and their shoulders start to go up and they start to tense. And then I get to sit there and go, I know exactly what you're talking about. Deep breath. We have easy solutions here. And they just go, oh, okay.
And in that engagement, I guess let's get to my next question is, I'm a company, I've started deploying AI platforms and technologies. I realize we don't have good hygiene. I've got a sense that things, or maybe I'm a bit worried about some of the legislation that's coming down the turnpike, and I'm thinking I need to get ahead of this. Can I bolt this stuff on afterwards? Let's go back to the software development analogy. A lot of people would say you can't take crappy code and make it good without basically having to rewrite it from scratch, right? It's basically a complete reboot. Can you add responsible principles onto an existing set of systems and practices, or do you need to clean sheet it and start again?
Yes and no. It depends. Classic consulting answer, I know, right there. So in some cases, you do need to clean slate, but those cases are rare. It's very rare for me to walk in to a company and say, we got to scrap all of this. Instead, it's more common to actually go in, look at the processes, look at what's already running. There's usually already responsible AI factors at play, but it's just not under that title, and it doesn't have the central strategy and organization. So a little bit actually answering to question you asked before, one of my first tasks is to get the lay of the land, this visibility of what's already here and what's missing, and then building from there. So it's not having to reinvent the wheel and go all the way back. Like, let me give you an easy example here. So let's talk about procurement. A lot of companies are buying AI products and services, right? All companies already have a procurement process in place. We don't need to go in and completely scrap your procurement process for AI. Instead, what I'm looking for is what is already built into your procurement process and where are the missing gaps that need to be plugged for AI. So there is this kind of misconception of if we didn't do it from the start, we just can't do it. It's better to start and try something, do something, than do nothing. You have to get over that inertia to get moving. The cases that you do have to scrap and go all the way back are actually when you're looking at models that have been pushed into production and they aren't performing in alignment with your needs, in alignment with your company mission, or is causing harm to your users. Those you do have to scrap and bring back. And I will say there are factors of responsible AI practices, like documentation. That's a very simple one. You need to document what you do. You'd be so surprised how rare that is to find that companies actually do this. Documentation is, it's a practice and it's a fundamental piece that is so important to get into place that the longer you go without it, the more costly it is to go back and retrospectively fit it in, because you have to retrain people's habits to get that documentation in there instead of starting from the very beginning with that responsible AI practice already code of practice within your teams.
You outlined the 3 pillars of building responsible AI strategies. Do you want to walk us through those?
So people, process, technology, super simple. You'll hear me talk about it all the time. You already started to hear a little bit of that terminology when I was giving some of my answers before. So the 3 pillars to responsible AI: holistic responsible AI that's going to stick and actually bring the business value and impact that you're looking for. You have the people foundation. And think of this as asking yourself the question of who's building or using my technology. Just the who, the people behind it. Then you move to the next pillar and you've got process. And that is the question of how are my people building or using this technology? Operationally, what are our procedures? What are our practices? Do we have frameworks? How do we build this? How do we use this? And then finally, you have the technology pillar. And the important factor of the technology pillar is I didn't design it to cover all of these very specific questions like how do you get a transparent system, or how do you combat bias, or how do you ensure that you have all the privacy checks. The technology pillar, the way I have it designed, is what technical infrastructure do you need in place to be able to execute really on anything AI? And each of these 3 pillars, they have 3 elements in each of them. So you get this matrix of 9, basically. And those 9 elements you can map what's already there, what you're missing. And it covers that holistic picture of what you need in place. But those 3 pillars, people, process, technology, if you want, well, you need, but if you're taking that holistic approach to AI and responsible AI, you need all 3 of those pillars activated.
Related question, what role does government have to play? Because sometimes for a lot of us, we're just like, you know what, my view isn't really important. Let's just outsource it to the government who'll tell us what's ethical today and more importantly, therefore legal.
Let's start with actually the difference between law and ethics. That's a good starting point here. So you can be completely 100% within the law. You can be compliant, legal, and you can be highly unethical at the same time. So ethics and law are not the same thing. Law is basically, I heard it described once and it stuck with me ever since. The law is the codification of our morals. So as we mature over time and we understand core concepts like, let's take child labor in the United States. In the United States, we have decided that child labor is a no-go, right? we have that universal law. We can apply that across the board. So that's when that principle, that moral concept of no child should be forced into labor, that gets translated into our law because it can be applied black and white across the board. So that the law is a very important part of this equation. It forms the foundation. It's like laying the concrete for a house. It creates that solid foundation. It also helps catch bad actors. Now, the question around ethics, though, comes more into line of where you want to go. It's sometimes people phrase it in terms of what you can and cannot do is determined by law, and what you should and should not do is determined by ethics. I like to take a little bit of a different approach that's a little more inspiring. And let's try it this way. So, Paul, what is something that matters to you in life? What does Paul care about?
I'm going to go with cheese.
Same. As long as there's
no,
no
all right.
parsley
Let's just
on
say
the
the
cheese.
environment. Let's just say the environment. I'll give you the environment.
We can go with cheese. Cheese, environment, what have you. These are things that matter to you, right? So, does your love of cheese and the environment, we can do it with both.
Yep.
Would you say that your love, your focus on these influences the decisions that you make?
Yes.
All right, you're making ethical decisions there. You have something that you value, the environment and cheese. You are going to align your decisions in that direction of the environment and cheese. I'm including cheese because it's just making me laugh now.
Me too now.
But you make those. So like for example, for me, something that really matters to me is spending time with my loved ones, my friends and family. So despite the fact that I spend a ton of time on the road, I always make sure that I am around for important events like weddings and birthdays and things that matter to the people that I care about. My love, my value of that quality time with my friends and family influences my decisions and leads me towards that kind of fulfillment, that purpose. One of the first questions that I ask clients is, what are you known for? With your customers, what are you known for? And it's always an interesting conversation because you'll hear people start to talk about, in some cases they'll say safety. We prioritize the safety of our customers and that's why they come to us. And others will say, well, it's our creativity and our customers come to us because we prioritize creativity. Those are guiding values that the company itself has built success off of in alignment with those values. So when we're talking about AI ethics, we're tapping into those values that already exist within the company. And I'll put a little asterisk here. We'll return back quickly for more of a community-facing comment there. But we're looking at how do we align our, again, adoption, development, what have you, implementation of AI with those, not only with those values, but to promote those values. So if your company is known for its creativity, how do we use AI to push that creativity further, where that is a defining value, where your decisions are aligned with that value? And returning back to the little asterisk real quick, the important factor with AI ethics and this space that's a little bit different than business ethics is we have to still look at the global scale. So we are looking at alignment with company values, but we have to consider within that community values and market values that are at play. So I explain this in the first part of my book, but it's not only the company values, but it's also the industry values. So like medicine, you have the Hippocratic Oath. That one's really a diehard one. Those are industry values. And then looking at community values, and those sometimes you can find in policy, community culture, just the community that you are servicing on that global scale. So you do have to take a bigger view than just the company, but it is, what are you known for? How do we align these decisions with these values? That
so-called social license to operate that you never get literally granted, but is the basis upon which you're able to do business most of the time. And so this is a deep cut. I'm going to send you into a weird place now. I mean, do you have a view on this? I mean, talk to me, reflect on that notion of the unintended consequences of AI.
the unintended consequences of our actions. So I've got 2 points here. First one being, there is this thought experiment of the singularity problem of we'll create an AI that's smarter than us, and then that AI will create an AI smarter than it, and then we'll just have super intelligence and this giant boom of intelligence. And the question I always like to throw the little wrench into the system is, what happens if we do create an AI that is smarter than us? I put that in quotations because that's a whole different debate. But let's say we create an AI smarter than us. What's to say that AI won't sit there and go, well, creating something smarter than me is just plain stupid, so I'm not going to, because I'm and putting that stop of why would I ever create something smarter than me? So that was a little more humorous, but
no, but it's a really good point, because I mean, ultimately it is the same question. Why would you create something that is capable of destroying you, but you may not intend to create something capable of destroying you?
I think there is a lot of fear mongering going around AI right now because it's good for business, and for a lot of different ways.
It makes headlines.
It makes headlines. It gets, no press is bad press, and that whole idea, and it also makes it feel like AI is untouchable when that is very far from the truth. A lot of the things that companies claim AI can do, it can't. And at the end of the day, we're still in control. It's going to be very difficult to make an AI system that can destroy humanity unless we engineer, let's say, some biohack, some crazy disease, and it's COVID-19 all over again, but worse. Unless we do that, it's really hard to have, like, Siri's not going to take over the world. And we use Siri all the time.
Can't even get my name right, to be fair.
Yes, we are creating things that have a lot of unintended consequences, but I think it'd be very difficult to create an AI system so powerful that we completely, wiped ourselves off the face of the earth along with cockroaches and the Twinkies. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Oh, look, I love it. It's, as I say, it is. It's definitely it's definitely that sort of apocalyptic scenario. And again, I bring it up only because in the topic of discussion about responsible and ethical use of technology, I think up until as I say, there's been a couple of pivotal points in the history of humanity, and I think the weaponization of the atom was one of them. And I think we're all looking at AI, and we're asking, and look, frankly, I think it's healthy that we're asking the question, because it demonstrates
Absolutely.
an appreciation of protecting the things we value most, and that's what it means to be human, folks. With that, I just want to thank you a lot. Congratulations on the book. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you all for listening. How can people get in touch with you if people are interested in finding out more?
You can visit my website, oliviagambelin.com. That pretty much, I'm squinting because it always needs updating, but that pretty much houses everything. You can find my book there. You can find the values canvases link there. You can find links to podcasts and interviews and courses that I do, and also a couple of my speaking recordings even. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. And I do eventually respond if you message me on LinkedIn. It does sometimes take me a while, depending on how much I have neglected my LinkedIn inbox, but I do get back to people.
I love it. I resemble that remark. Speaking of LinkedIn, however, you can also get in touch with our sponsor, Cloudera. If you've got any feedback for them on the podcast, they'd love to hear from you. Hit them up at Cloudera on LinkedIn. So if you've got any questions, suggestions for future guests or topics, we'd love to hear from you. With that, thank you, Olivia. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Joining in, and we'll see you all next week.